Welcome to the Retirement Roadmap by SHP Financial, a podcast empowering today's retirees and pre-retirees to make well-informed financial decisions that will help you spend more time living and dreaming than worrying and wondering. Join me, Matthew Peck, along with my co-hosts, Derek Gregoire and Keith Ellis, as we share actionable financial strategies and insights, as well as interview top thought leaders in the world of finance, accounting, and estate planning. This is all aimed at preparing you for the retirement you've always dreamed of. Our high-quality holistic planning process has helped thousands of families retire and create what we like to call the ripple effect. The Retirement Roadmap is your guide to financial freedom. Are you ready to get started? Let's go.
We are joined here today by Tom Rogers. Tom is the Chief Growth Officer at FB Insure, a large full-service independent insurance agency serving personal, commercial, and benefits clients throughout the Northeast. Tom's a 20-year insurance industry veteran focused on challenging the traditional insurance buying process in favor of a holistic advisory approach. He holds numerous insurance designations, including the CIC, CRM, LIA, as well as the PWCA. We can check out those later and see what those are all about.
No need.
Tom has sat on numerous insurance company advisory councils at the local and national level. And Tom's days are balanced between helping business owners properly safeguard their organization from risk, which is very important, we're going to get into throughout today's show, while also executing on the growth strategies that have made FB Insure one of the fastest growing agencies in the Northeast. With roots that can be traced back over 100 years, FB Insure is a long-time local leader in providing insurance solutions that promise to extend beyond insuring with an E, not just insuring. I love it. I love this stuff. FB Insure has 11 offices in Massachusetts and is currently embarking on a plan for expansion throughout New England. FB Insure has 120 highly professional employees across their commercial, personal, and benefits divisions and is wholly owned by Patriot Growth Insurance Services, a top 30 national broker and one of the fastest growing agencies in the country. So, Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Derek. Happy to be here.
And I know Tom from way back. We've been friends for many, many years, so it's good to be in here. And we'll try not to laugh too much. Let's keep the inside jokes to a minimum. But I think when we're meeting with folks on a day in, day out basis, right? And obviously here we have the SHP Retirement Roadmap. And it looks at income, investments, taxes, healthcare, estate planning, all under one roof. Under investments, so a lot of people think just investments, that's just a portfolio. But a lot of business owners, if you're listening and you're a business owner, that might be your biggest asset. And so obviously insurance, when you hear when we talk about insurance, it can sound boring, but that's so important when it comes to financial planning, is protecting your biggest asset. And so Tom, maybe just a little bit about what got you into insurance in the beginning, like where'd this all start?
Oh boy, nobody ever plans to get into insurance, Derek. It just happens, and it did that for me. I was working in the high tech world, chasing some .com money, and I actually came home for a funeral. My father had worked in the industry. His best friend, who was like a second father to me, worked in the industry, and it was one of those times in my life I was working 90 hours a week. I was going a little crazy. And I was watching these guys when I got home. They were all smiles all the time, and they were having fun. They enjoyed what they do. And I said, well, maybe it's worth giving that a shot. So yeah. 20, almost 21 years later, here I am, and I've enjoyed the ride.
So you started at 15, now you're 35?
No, unfortunately, no. Those are not the numbers.
That's a complete lie. And again, I think the word, when it comes to insurance, even here, like at SHP, when we're going through all of our stuff, like it's a lot. But if you overlook something, it can be catastrophic, and the last thing you want is something to be missed when it comes to your biggest asset, which for most of people listening that own a business, it's their business. And so we're not, instead of going down the personal lines, obviously everyone has homeowners insurance, the basic stuff, but from a commercial standpoint, for business owners listening, what do you think the biggest risks are today to the business owner?
Oh gosh, we could do a 2-day long podcast on the risks to businesses today. There's certainly many of them out there, and I think you hit on the point of, for many business owners, we do all this planning. We work with you and your incredible team. We work with estate planning attorneys. We do all the things right in order to prepare ourselves for the remainder of our lives. But for most of us that are business owners, our biggest asset tends to be that business. And it can be overlooked. And I think that in itself is one of the biggest risks that are out there. We
Just
often
overlooking it in general.
Yeah, just not even thinking about that as part of your portfolio and putting the time and effort in necessary to protect it properly.
So if you're looking at a business, Tom, like a local business, like what are some traditional, like basically traditional insurance policies that people have or people should be aware of?
Your typical policies are going to be your property, your liability, your workers' comp, your auto. Most companies are going to have those in place. They may have an umbrella in place that's going to go over a portion of those policies. But there's a variety of other policies, and some of them either they're highlighted by the environment that we're in today. An example would be cyber liability.
Yes, I learned that. Yeah, exactly.
A product that has evolved pretty substantially over the course of my career. That product was very different when I first got into this business. It was actually very new to the marketplace.
Was 20 years ago, was cybersecurity even a thing?
It was
brand new, right?
It was a thing, and the policy itself was actually often called cybersecurity and not even cyber liability. And there was a couple different types of cyber policies you can buy. And what you've seen over a period of time is an evolution of the product where it's somewhat similar across the different carriers that are out there. But here's one of the biggest complexities of insurance, and really one of the biggest risks for business owners as well, is the policy is very different. Even though it's evolved and say 80% of the language in policies may be similar across carriers.
Yep.
And when I say carriers, it's insurance companies. The other 20% is where you get tripped up. And this is where an insurance broker's role is very similar to your role. And it's to keep wealthy people wealthy. We
Sure.
have that conversation with our clients all the time. It's not the $10,000 fire loss that's going to have an impact on your business and going to have an impact on your financial well-being and the well-being of your family. It's the unexpected losses. It's when you think a policy has coverage and it doesn't.
Yeah.
And those tend to be big. Those are the $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, even beyond that.
Well, that's the thing. I remember, like when even here at SHP in our almost 19 years of existence, we've survived a flood, we've survived a fire. And like the last thing I think about when I wake up in the morning is my insurance policies, right? But when that moment happens, it's like you better hope that you have what you thought you have, because I remember the cost. And luckily we had a great policy. You guys, everything was taken care of. But that, real quick, like how important it is when you face a crisis. And that's just a simple one that I'm talking about because those do happen and most policies cover that. But if you have an incident where it's not covered and you think you are, you could be out, millions.
And that happens quite a bit, unfortunately, and we see it all too often. Cyber is a perfect example because cyber is one of those policies some people think, well, it's kind of nice to have. Well, today you have to have it as a business owner, and it's harder to get today than it ever has been. You think about what's happened over the course of the last 18 months in this world. We've all gone home. Yep. We've got more security data risk, data flying, across the internet than there ever has been. There's and our greatest risk isn't generally our firewalls, it isn't our email system, it's our people.
Yes.
And when our people, we don't have as many controls over our people, that's when things happen.
Well, that's the thing, and even here, I think you look at all the possibilities of like what can happen, and even now, which was not a thing many years ago. When I started in the business, it was like you call someone. There wasn't even really emails, back and forth. I don't think when I started in the business, I had an email, or if I did, my clients didn't have it. They just called me. Now we have full policies and procedures. If someone's identity's nothing to do with us, but people have identity stolen. And there's like a 15-step process we have to go through that wasn't even thought of 15, 20 years ago. So here we are. So we're talking about all these risks. So what are the major risks that you guys see that aren't covered? If someone's listening, yeah, I think I have a policy, but what's something that might not be covered in a traditional policy?
Sure. Yeah, your traditional. I talked about those traditional policies earlier. Another perfect example beyond cyber that is a bigger deal today than it ever has been. And in this war for talent and people jumping ship from one business to another, and the period of layoffs that we had at the outset of the pandemic, it's employment practices liability insurance. And that is, jokingly in the industry, we kind of call it the Harvey Weinstein policy. It's the hiring, the firing, the discrimination, it's the harassment.
Well, that has to be more prevalent than ever, right? Because now everything's so sensitive and
absolutely.
And everyone's ready to it's a very litigious society we live in.
You said it. And it's unfortunate that we're living in it. And, the insurance industry gets villainized as a result of it, but we're really responding to what's happening in the world that we live in. So employment practices liability, a lot of business owners will if they're in a period of time where they're in a cash crunch, that's one of the first policies they'll ask, do I need that? Unfortunately, we've seen it too many times where somebody has eliminated that from their portfolio of insurance.
So what would happen? Let's say they eliminated it, and then all of a sudden there's a claim.
There's a claim, and now you are left to litigate that claim on your own. And 9 times out of 10, those claims don't go very far, but I can tell you just the cost of litigation can be substantial. It could be well into the 6 figures just to litigate that claim. And the 1 time out of 10 where it really does become a problem, those are huge awards. And now you're out of pocket, potentially 7 and well into the 7 figures on something like that.
Yeah, so that's someone that you're going to want to make sure you have if you're trying to keep someone that's worked their butt off to build a business. We're trying to protect that for good people that have done that work. And what any other traditional policies that are usually missing certain things that you see if someone let's say you're sitting down with a business for the first time? Because I know when we're sitting down with a client, 99 I don't want to say 99 times out of 100, that's a little aggressive, but when someone comes in for the first time, if you talk to anyone on the team here, it's like, I know they have a portfolio. They have a portfolio. There's some sort of stocks, bonds, mutual funds, but that's their entire plan. And I already know I'm going to find hey, what's your tax what's your tax strategy? Not filing your taxes, but what have you done to prepare to reduce taxes going forward? And then the head turn what? We don't do that. And so I already know a lot of people are missing things from estate planning, tax planning, even from a financial planning perspective. So you must have the same things on your end when you sit down, you want everyone to have all the appropriate coverage and have a well-rounded, holistic plan. But like the one you just mentioned, that's one that's probably missing quite a bit. Any other ones that you see?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's so many different areas we could focus in on, but you're keying in on some of the things that we see probably more often than not. Mm-hmm. Another one would be crime, and it's internal crime. It's your employees stealing from you, and we all have, we're all good-natured, human nature, right? We think nobody's going to do that to us. I've known my employees forever, and it's the employees that have known forever, or the family members that, unfortunately, we have seen these stories unfold more times than not. And when we come in to meet with somebody and we talk about the potential portfolio of insurance and what they should be buying, that's one of those areas where people are saying, I don't really need that, or I only need a limited amount there because I know that's not going to happen to me. Yeah. They think along the lines of somebody, maybe back in the warehouse grabbing something and going home, and how much can you really get away with? The reality is and you see it on the news from time to time, the story about, and I hate to characterize it this way, but oftentimes it's the little old lady that's been there for 40 years, and come to find out she's been stealing for the last 12. And it's millions of dollars that she's gotten away with.
Wow.
Or it's a family member, that we don't have the proper controls in place, and they're cutting checks to an entity that you're not aware of, and that entity happens to be them.
Yep.
And so we've seen that all too often. And the funny thing is when we're coming in and we're selling those products, usually it's that person that's in the room. No. And they're helping to make the decision not to buy that coverage. And we've seen it time and time again.
Yeah, so and it's probably from your side, you don't want to feel like, hey, we're trying to add this premium to make it more expensive, because then you're just trying to do this for me or for you. And obviously, me knowing you for many, many years in the business you have, it's not about that, but it's just you want to do what's right for the client, and obviously no one wants to over-insure themselves, but there's things you can't overlook. And for the price of adding a rider to cover one of those things, for the protection that you get, it's just so worth making sure you have a robust plan. And a lot of people I'm sure a lot of it's just giving a second opinion, hey, get in a second opinion, talk to Tom or his team at FB Insure, because those are things that at a worst case, you have everything covered, right? And you wasted, the time it took. But sometimes you're uncovering things, I'm sure, like I do, that...
Yeah, it's unfortunately, very rarely is everything covered.
Yes.
And it goes to the complexity of our industry and the complexity of the industries that we're working with, because frankly, SHP needs something different than the manufacturer that I talked about earlier needs versus the contractor or whatever other
just
industry
like us
you're
and the
in.
clients we're dealing with. Some people don't have a business, and this isn't even a topic, right?
Yeah.
And so the purchasing process, I've heard some people say, it's hard to buy commercial insurance. Is that true?
It's, the purchasing process is probably, it may be the biggest pitfall that we see out there. And the unfortunate thing is our industry has trained people over a long period of time how to buy insurance. And when we walk into a new potential relationship, oftentimes there's a stack of policies sitting on that table ready for us to take and copy and go and come back with lots of quotes. And that's what people are expecting. And again, it's our industry that's trained them to think along those lines. And unfortunately, people will bring in multiple brokers and ask them all to go do that.
Yeah.
What happens in that scenario is everybody brings something back. And we talked about the complexity of the policies themselves earlier and how language is different from one to the next, where you're left to be the expert to determine which of those policies actually is the best for your organization. 9 times out of 10, you're making that decision based upon the number in the bottom right hand, of the first page.
Yep.
And not necessarily thinking along the lines of, all of these other complexities. And guess what? All 3 brokers that have come in to give you their quotes, they all say theirs is the best because it is. So, our recommendation is one in which you actually interview brokers. And it's almost like you're interviewing your own internal vice president of risk management and insurance.
Yeah.
You need to think along those lines. Would you hire somebody that you don't trust? Because you don't want to end up with the 3rd best broker who might just happen to have the best price.
True.
The reality is most sophisticated brokers have access to the majority of the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to bring a variety of different quotes to you, a variety of different options to you. And if there's one person that's controlling that process, and there's transparency in that process, and there's trust in that process, you are going to get the competition you were hoping for created in the insurance carrier marketplace.
By the person who you trust.
By the person who you trust. And that person's going to be able to lay out the differences between carriers. And some of those are quantitative and some of them are qualitative. Mm-hmm. Different claims, levels of claim service, different levels of loss control, different levels of resources that you can take advantage of as a business to reduce your total cost of risk in your organization.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, even when we talk to our clients, because when we're building a full plan, right, the entire picture, it's like we're talking about like from A to Z, investments, taxes, healthcare, legacy, and within the plan, in tax planning, but within those plans, we're looking at their insurance policies. If it's an individual, it's usually life insurance, long-term care. Do they need them? Why do they need them? If it's a business, then it opens up this whole can of worms. And so getting off topic a little bit, you being a business owner for over 20 years, me being a business owner for 20 years, and I probably should have prepped you this before because it's kind of a thoughtful question, but
oh boy,
because I think a lot of business owners will be the one they're listening to this podcast or this radio show because it's about business owners and insurance. But anything in the business world, if you could tell your 25-year-old self what you know now, right? Is there any major lessons? And I can go first if it gives you time to think about it, because I think for me it was more like just from a business standpoint in general, which is off topic, but like there's so much I wish I knew about like building processes back then, or like when we started it was like I want to build financial plans, I want to help people. But the business side, no one really teaches you. Even if you go to school for business, and I was in finance, like no one tells you how to run a business, look at a P&L, and make decisions on like how to make what you do replicatable, and can you scale it, and can you provide value. So that's for us. I guess we have our COO, Michelle Short. She helped us a ton, and she still does. But I wish we hired her like 5 years earlier. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
Built out those processes and procedures early on. So I don't know if there's anything else that you tell your 25-year-old self in the business sense of like, hey, some of the things you've learned along the way.
I think a lesson that knowing you as I know you and myself at 25 and who we are today versus who we were at 25, patience would probably be the one virtue, I would say.
Very true.
As a business owner, you kind of learn along the way. It's funny, I was thinking about this last night, in just the concept of brand and the importance of brand. And it resulted from a conversation I had with a client of mine who's actually working with you.
Yep.
And we were talking as we were driving yesterday, and he was talking about how happy he was with SHP.
Yeah, he said the same thing about you guys, by the way.
That's flattering, but in your brand, we often say, you talked about beyond insuring, ensuring. Well, that's a tagline, right? Until our clients start to say we are ensuring something for them, whether it's their business, their family, it's not a brand until that happens. And that it struck me with SHP that your brand is what people say about you, and people say wonderful things about you as an organization. And I liken that to the fact that you guys, you think about Michelle and the procedures that she's put in place and the structure that you have as an organization. It's incredible what you've done. And for me, building that brand value for us is probably another big lesson that I've had over time. That, at 25, you thought you put a few things down on paper. Yeah. This is what it's going to do. And this is how everybody's going to. And we're off to the races, right? Well, the reality is that doesn't happen. It's not without rolling up your sleeves, doing a lot of hard work.
Yep, and having a good team built around you.
A great team built, right? Unless you are the dumbest person in the room, you've done it wrong.
We're good at that.
If you think you're the smartest person in the room, you have surrounded yourself with the wrong people.
I must be really successful then, because I'm always the dumbest one in the room here. No, in all seriousness, I think one of the things I've talked about on the show in the past, and I continue to talk about with my team, my family, faith, everything you look at it, and I've said this before, but it strikes a chord because you've been talking about all these little details, right? Like looking at all the little details within an insurance policy for a business, right? Do we have this? Do we have that? And I feel like the more you can take care of all the little things in life, in business, and insurance policy, and for us, it's like making sure there's no stone left unturned. The bigger things work themselves out, right? So if you can pay attention to the small details, the bigger things just work themselves out naturally as a result of paying attention and not trying to skip steps, whether it's business. And I think that's what you guys do an amazing job at FB Insure in just making, like I said, the comprehensiveness of looking over what someone has, what someone might be missing. And most people don't do that. They're just looking, hey, I want it. And that's the difference between a good firm and someone that's just throwing a quote together, trying to make a sale and move on to the next one.
Without a doubt.
So any other final thoughts? I think we've covered a lot. I think we've hopefully opened up folks' eyes. If you're listening and you have, I know Tom would say, whether it's with him or someone else, FB Insure is an amazing company. I'd recommend getting a hold of them. But again, if you have certain policies, if you have a business and you you know what, I got to make sure I'm covered for all this and I don't know if I am, get that second opinion. At least take a look at it. In worst case, you're left in the same position, and hopefully it's in a good position. Sure,
absolutely. I think you mentioned earlier looking at individuals' insurance portfolios, and I think a lot of the same concepts apply. Whether it's you're looking at your home and your auto and your personal umbrella, or you're thinking about part of your estate planning process with disability and life insurance. It's reviewing these things on a regular basis. And that doesn't necessarily mean quoting things up on a regular basis. Underwriters are people too. If they see you every year, you're eventually going to get shuffled to the bottom of that pile.
Exactly.
But reviewing to make sure things are done and making sure those little things are taken care of. Because if the little things are not taken care of, there's a really good chance that the big things aren't being taken care of.
Correct. Exactly. So thank you so much, Tom Rogers from FB Insure, for joining us. That was awesome information. I think a lot of people listening will get some good value out of it. And again, we're going to have you out. I'm sure we can probably go on for 10 hours. People might be falling asleep at that point. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Derek. Appreciate being here.
Thanks for listening to the Retirement Roadmap podcast by SHP Financial. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button so future episodes are automatically downloaded directly to your device. And if you've liked what you heard, please share the show. Create your own little ripples so we can help even more people with their retirement goals. If you want access to all past interviews, including notes, resources, and exclusive content from SHP Financial, visit shpfinancial.com/podcast. Thanks again for joining us on the Retirement Roadmap podcast. And for all the attorneys out there, disclaimers and disclosures, I'm just going to put on my super serious voice and add our own. No statements made during the Retirement Roadmap podcast shall constitute tax, legal, or accounting advice. You should consult your own legal or tax professional on any such matters. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Investments involve risk, and unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Our investment advisory services are offered through SHP Wealth Management LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Insurance sales are offered through SHP Financial LLC. Our advisors and insurance reps may offer clients advice and/or products from each entity. No client is under any obligation to purchase any insurance product.